Oh, we're recording. Okay, great. Oh, the last time I did this, I talked too fast and I said a lot. So that's gonna be my my goal is to say less and not talk too fast.
If you'd like, we can keep a tally.
Oh no, that's okay. I don't know that I want to know how many times I say it. I'd rather you listen to the content and not be counting my ums.
I think we're at a good point here, Gail, for me to maybe do an introduction and then hand things over to you.
Okay.
So, hey everyone, welcome to the GIX Speaker Series. And a special welcome to our friends who are joining us today from the university's Department of Human-Centered Design and Engineering. I'm Anthony Robinson. I'm the Associate Director of Industry Relations here at GIX. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our speaker this afternoon, Gail Thynes. As a product designer in cloud and AI studios focused on Microsoft Azure, Gail builds tools and experiences that help developers and IT administrators manage security at their organizations. She's really passionate about fostering creative communities and mentoring students, and she leads partnerships between Microsoft Design and the University of Washington's HCDE department and the Savannah College of Art and Design. So prior to becoming a UX designer, Gail had a successful career in fashion merchandising, working for brands like Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren. Oh, that's really cool, Gail. So she lives in West Seattle with her husband and her indifferent cat, Framus. And in her spare time, she enjoys sailing, biking, and traveling. I thought that all cats were indifferent.
Yeah, mine is especially indifferent.
Extra indifferent. So Gail's talk today is titled Demystifying the UX Design Career Path. And we really appreciate having you, Gail. Thanks so much again for taking the time to present to our students and to our alumni and guests today. I'll hand things over to you, and I'll stick around to facilitate questions from the audience later on.
Okay, so let me see, how do I, is there a way, oh, there it is, share screen. Sorry, I use Teams, I don't use Zoom, so I'm less familiar with this. I'm gonna share my screen. So, not commuting today. All right, so I'm gonna talk today a little bit about demystifying what design looks like, what the week and the day of a UX designer looks like in industry. And hopefully along the way, I'm gonna share some 3 major life lessons I think I've learned as my career has advanced at Microsoft. So now if I just can figure out how to advance, there we go. So the agenda that I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me. And although we just went over some of that, and talk a little bit about why we need designers, or at least very briefly on why we need designers in the world, or how I define maybe a designer. And then talk about the different design projects that I work on in the span of like a given week. And also show you my calendar over 3 different phases of my career, and break down like the types of meetings and the type of projects that I'm working on. And then at the end, I'm gonna leave hopefully a lot of time for everyone to ask questions, and really anything's on the table, so feel free to ask me anything. What it's like to work at Microsoft, whatever you want to know. So a little bit about me, as it was said, I had this great career back in fashion merchandising, where I worked for iconic brands like Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein. I saw the writing on the wall at the time that big box retail was not always going to be the thriving industry that it was. And I thought, well, what is it about this career that I liked, and what could I envision for the future? And it was around that time that I went back to school at the University of Washington, specifically the Human-Centered Design and Engineering program. And I heard about this thing called user-centered design. And I was like, that sounds really cool. I want to go learn more about it. And that propelled me onto this career path that I just absolutely find completely rewarding. My first job out of school was at Microsoft, and I've been on the same team ever since. So I graduated in December of 2015, and yeah, in March of that year, so I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary on the same team at Microsoft. So I work on Microsoft Identity. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is, but that's the team that I work on. We work on a product called Azure Active Directory, and I'll explain what that is. So Microsoft has 3 pillars of products. We have gaming, which is pretty self-explanatory. We have experiences and devices, which is really all of the Office, like your Outlook, all those types of products, your SharePoint, and your Surface laptop, any devices that we make. And then the third is what we call cloud and artificial intelligence, C&AI. And that's really where our cloud infrastructure and enterprise software is designed and built. That's the area that I work on. Identity is oftentimes called the control plane. So it's how you actually get access to all of those Microsoft things that you might be using. So for example, how many people here have seen this screen, right? We have over 800 million people who access the screen every day. These are heavily debated and designed and tested pixels. And it was the result of a 3-year converged effort to bring all of our brands together. So this is like one example of something we do in identity. Another one is we designed the Authenticator app, which organizations use when you're have to prove who you are to get access to your enterprise account. And then the third is we have this product called Azure Active Directory, which is where enterprise companies manage all the identities in their organization. So when someone joins a company and you get your username and password, or you move, you change your name, or you leave the company, this is the team that manages how you get access to all of that stuff. The product that we design is really about helping organizations connect to the cloud and also protect their corporate intellectual property. So that's kind of the world that I work in. And then, you know, like I'm not just a designer, right? I have this whole other, like, you know, we get to bring our whole authentic selves to work. And for me, you know, that includes like my passion for traveling, and I love to travel the world and meet new creatures and experience different cultures. This is that indifferent cat that I was talking about. It's a great example of me trying to get her to love me, and she just doesn't. You know, I love to bake, especially mastering French pastry techniques. This is me making macarons after like the 10th attempt. And then this is me this last summer sailing up in the San Juan Islands with my husband. So, you know, these are all things that, you know, that bring me joy in the world. So why do we need designers? The simplest and easiest answer is, you know, because we have problems like this in the world, that when I go to park, I don't know which of these signs actually, you know, applies to what I'm supposed to be doing. Is it Sunday? Is it 8 a.m. to midnight? Am I allowed to park? Am I not allowed to park? Right. And so I think, you know, like what we do as designers is we take problems like this and we try to make sense of them, right? And so we make things look hopefully a little bit better and a little bit more clear. So my job and how I approach a lot of the projects that I work on is as a problem solver. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's 4 types of projects that I get to work on. And so tactical, strategic, visionary, and influential. And some of them are working on products, some of them are working on people, and some of them are working on like cultural things. So all of them, at various stages of my career, I work on some more than I work on others. And before I talk about all the different types, I'm going to talk a little bit about influence. I could give an entire talk on influence because I think it's, it's a really important skill. And, if you take anything away from this talk today, it's that, the thing about working in design is that it's a team sport. And so much of what we do is developing skills to learn to play well with others. And so I think knowing where you are and who you're trying to influence in any given time is one of the skills to master. And so for me, I have several circles of influence that I'm constantly navigating through. So the first one is my design team. So that is started out many years ago as 5 people. That's now our team has grown. So now there's 15 of us. There's 15 designers and design managers on my immediate team that I have the opportunity to influence. So then there's my product team. So that at a company like Microsoft varies greatly. I have about 22 PMs that can schedule time on my calendar at any given point in time to kick off design work. And beyond that, there's the engineers that support them, as well as the broader identity organization, which is up to 1,200 people. So when I say product team, I'm talking about like that group of people. Then there's the design studio that my team sits in. So I'm talking about cloud and AI, and that's a team of about 620 designers that span around the globe, right? So we're talking about a global design team. We're talking about all kinds of disciplines as far as like research, content, design producers, which are like PMs for design. So there's it's motion designers, sound designers, it's everything, as well as our design leadership. So that's in our design studio. Now you're talking about the company, right? So Microsoft as a whole, there are projects that sometimes span across those 3 pillars that I was talking about. So I might be working with a team over in experience and devices, or I might be working with somebody in legal. So now you're talking about a project that might span all the way across Microsoft. And then we're talking about industry, right? Like what is the influence that I may be having outside of Microsoft on the UX industry as a whole? So tactical. These tend to be much smaller, short-term projects. They are functional improvements. They could be, should it be a blue button or a blue link for A/B testing for increased engagement? It could be something as small as fixing some accessibility bugs, or a customer, or usually in our case, multiple customers have filed a support issue on maybe a lack of documentation or something isn't working. And so we're asked to come in and to help with that. So these are all types of like tactical projects. They usually take about, I don't know, I would say they can take everything from like a one-off couple hours all the way to a couple of weeks to execute. So when we talk about the circle of influence, these tend to be less like a much smaller scope of impact. So there are things that I'm working with either somebody on my design team or the product team, and every once in a while it could even span across our design studio. So because I work in Azure, that could be maybe working with one of the portal teams to fix something. And when I say Azure portal, there's a whole design team that works on what the Azure portal, our cloud infrastructure, should look like. So it might be working with some of them. So an example of this, I showed this earlier. This is our version of a kind of like the app gallery on your iPhone, but for enterprise companies. So it's not quite as maybe as hot as the Apple as your Apple store, but this is where if you're an organization and you want to say implement, the G Suite for your organization in Gmail, or you want to include Dropbox, and now everybody in the company is going to start using Dropbox. This is where you could go and find the application, and you could integrate it with your business and set up things like single sign-on so that you can sign in with your company account and you sign into everything. So the nature of this project was just adding in the option for government cloud, right? So we recently had a big project where we won the government contract. And so we were doing some work to just make it so that if you were the Department of Defense and you needed to find an app, you could find an app that was already integrated for the government, right? So the second type of project is strategic. These tend to be longer term efforts with more impact. These could be, an example would be understanding like end-to-end customer journeys and how people are using your product. It might be taking two things that exist in these other places and how do you bring them together? That happens a lot at Microsoft. It could be improving any like process on your team, like your design reviews, participating in company culture efforts, or working on personas, right? Maybe updating personas. These projects tend to have a much broader impact. So you're going to see less focus on your immediate design team. Now you're going to see some of the areas where they bleed into more on the product, the design studio. Now you're starting to see some of the Microsoft-wide efforts, as well as maybe even bleeding into some industry work. An example of this is recently Microsoft released a whole new suite of our icons, and you don't do something like that without some collaboration across all of the brands. So this was a really strategic effort where designers from all of these different product groups got together and interpreted our new design language and then released them out into the world. The third type of project that I work on is what I would call more visionary. It's where you're kind of birthing something new that didn't previously exist. You've identified a problem or a gap, say, in the product, and you're trying to figure out a way to close that gap. These projects can tend to be multi-year projects, right? Where, and definitely span more across Microsoft. This could be creating a new cultural program. It could be developing an entirely new design system or rolling out a new way for designers to collaborate together. All of those kind of contribute to these like much more broader visionary projects. So now visionary, there's all these different, you can do some of this on your own design team. You're going to see more of this on your product team as well as the design studio. Now you're starting to see more of these efforts be company-wide, and you're also getting an opportunity to do some of these out in the industry. An example of this is we have a new design language that you're starting to see in our Microsoft products called Fluent. This started about, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, coming up with the concepts. You're seeing a lot of transparency and depth, and it's taken 5 years. It took them to develop it and another 2 to actually get it implemented in all of our different products. We're currently working on bringing this into Azure. So a lot of the layering and the white, whereas before it was very flat and much more bright colors. So this is a great example of like envisioning what is our new design language for Microsoft? What does that mean for our brand, right? So that's the larger multi-year kind of projects. And then the last one, this is really about the influence that I talked about earlier. These, for me, this shows up as participating in my product team, getting a seat at the table to influence product planning and design bandwidth, right? This is also now taking on a mentor role for members, like newer members that join our team. This is really about sharing domain knowledge. This is developing new diversity and inclusion programs, or taking some of the expertise I've learned with HCDE and now taking it to other new schools like historically Black colleges and universities, as well as doing external projects or speaking outside of Microsoft about our company, or really evangelizing the discipline of enterprise design. So this is where, this is something that I believe you can practice at any stage of your career. And the earlier you start, the better it is. So yeah, influence, something I do. I started, I think you can start having one-on-ones and getting to know people as soon as you start. And this is something that you continually practice throughout the rest of your career. Okay. So an example of this is the mentorship program that I started, right? This started out as me identifying a problem and developing a relation. I already had a relationship with HCDE, but building this program, I've now become, through the 3 years of doing this, the impact on students started out as, I think, 43, we're up to about 65. And what that means is there's 65 people at Microsoft that are mentoring a student. Those mentors now span across Microsoft. We are expanding our programming, and now I get to take the lessons that I learned here and the expertise and kind of social capital that I've built up around this, and I get to now bring that to other schools, and now I'm impacting the industry, right? So this is where you start to have a lot more influence, not only on individuals, but on broader like efforts and programs. Okay, I'm gonna stop and take a sip of water. It's a lot of talking from me. So as a junior designer, you come in, it's generally your first, I don't know, I say 0 to 2 years, but I'm not gonna even, I'm trying to not set complete expectations around like when you actually go from one level to another. It's not as well defined as that. It really is an individual path, but I would say a junior designer can be anywhere from say like 0 to 2 years. You're really a generalist. Your primary focus is to get experience executing design work, right? It's you're gaining domain knowledge for wherever you're working. You're developing relationships with other designers and your product team, and really just learning like how things get built and how to navigate the systems that you're working in. So I've blocked out some stuff for anonymity, but this is what my calendar looked like. So this is in July of 2016. I don't know about you guys, but I look at this and I'm like, wow, I had a lot of free time. I can't believe how much free time I had, but a lot of that was spent learning, right? You're learning who your competition is. As I kind of put these icons here to like illustrate like the type of meeting I was having. So you can see like, here's a couple of meetings with some people I went to school with for, so this is where I'm getting to practice some influence. Most of the meetings here are tactical. I have about 4 design projects that I'm working on. And these are various design reviews or meetings with other designers, like senior designers that I'm helping. And then like I'm getting invited to a couple of strategic meetings, but I'm mostly just sitting in. I'm not actively participating. I'm there more to learn. And so the big kind of like thing to master at this stage of my career was was there's so many questions, right? Is that there's never a dumb question to ask. It's just like ask as many questions as you can. And, you know, it's only by asking the questions that you start to develop a sense for what the right questions are. And this is an area where I've watched many junior designers come out of school and really struggle with this area, is building the confidence to ask questions. And I will say, like, you're just in a learning mode, like ask everything. And is there documentation that I could read to ramp up on this? Who's the competition in this area? Is there somebody that I should talk to or that I should meet with to learn more? I think is there a timeline that this is due? Are we going to do usability testing? Like, there's a million questions that you could ask. And I think that this, all of these skills prepare you for the next level of your career. And so, like, really learning, building the confidence to ask the questions at the stage is really important. And I'll tell you, I'm going to share a story of failure where I didn't do that. So I had a PM, and he was on vacation, and I got cornered by a couple of engineers as I was walking down the hallway. And they're like, Gail, come here. We need your help for a second. And they whiteboarded this problem. And I was like, oh, yeah, I could see that. Well, here's 3 ways you could solve it. And I did a napkin sketch, right? And I articulated the benefits of each one of the napkin sketches and was like, well, you could do this. This is the best one. Here's the second one. It's less better. It's probably cheaper. And then there's this third one, which I'm not really sure about, but you know, we should probably maybe do some usability testing, but that's my 2 cents, right? And which one do you think they implemented? They implemented the worst one. And did they do any usability testing? No, they didn't do any usability testing. And so had I asked like some really important questions, like, is this an emergency? Can we wait for the PM to get back? Do we have time to do usability testing? I think had I asked any of those questions, we might have had a very different outcome. But I'll tell you, it was really painful a year later when I was visiting a customer and job shadowing someone in IT admin working on our product, and I had to watch the consequences of that and watch someone struggle using our product because of that one little moment that I had in that office where I gave a really bad option and it ended up in the product, and it took me 2 years to get that out of that. 2 years to get that out. So so I say, like, asking questions is really, really, really an important skill to master. Okay, so the third career level, or the second career level, is what I'm going to call mid-level. It's usually around 2 to 7 years. You start to develop some mastery or some specialization. You've gained some experience working on a variety of products. You've built up your portfolio. You now have some domain knowledge of the space that you're working in. And this opportunity to specialize enters where maybe you become the accessibility person on your team, or you now have experience running design, remote design sprints, or you're an interaction design whiz when it comes to mobile patterns, or like Android or iOS. So there's an opportunity to specialize. You're spending less time doing the tactical work, and you're starting to do more strategic work and even start to see some of the visionary projects come in. Let's see. So the calendar's starting to look a little more full, and the types of projects that I'm getting to work on now. So in this case, I had, I think, 2 or 3 visionary projects that I'm working on that were more like Microsoft wide. I have strategic project on a new persona called the first line worker that we were working on. So that's what these research studies were about. You're starting to see less of the tactical work, right? And you're also seeing them starting to attend meetings for more influence. So this is a product team meeting that I participate in every week, where I'm the only designer that supports this whole team. And so I show up to gain credibility and just build a reputation as their design expert. So you're starting to see more of those types of projects. Now there's more strategic efforts on aligning patterns across our team. So that's the kind of the breadth of the projects. Now you're seeing some of the HCDE mentorship stuff come in. So now I'm also doing projects where I'm influential outside of Microsoft. And then let's see. So the skill that I had to learn at this level, and I would say, I don't even know that I've achieved mastery of this yet. It's something that I still struggle with all the time, is like learning to say no. And even more so, like, how do you say no without saying no? And so this shows up in a lot of different ways doing product work, because you want to start saying no to the tactical stuff, right? So that you can say, so that you have time and you make room to do some of the cooler, more visionary work. And so there's a bunch of different ways to think about saying no without saying no. And so one of them is really around, do you need this right away? Can we start this in 2 weeks? I'm really busy doing XYZ. It could be, I can't do it, but I can get you somebody that can. Maybe at this stage of your career, you have other designers, like we have contract designers that support us in our tactical work. So I can't do it, but let me get you somebody that can. Or it could even be something like, here, I can give you a design template and you can start to envision your ideas, and I'll act more as a consultant and help you get that over the finish line, but I'm not going to do all of the design thinking for you. So I think like finding ways to offload some of that work so that I get to do some of the cooler stuff is definitely is a practice. And I will say, like, this is the thing that that helps me stay sane, and it's a practice that I've had to really leverage more during the pandemic, and be mindful of like setting clear expectations about what I can do while we're all working remotely. So yeah, so that's lesson number 2. So phase number 3 is where I'm at now. So I'm going to say I'm still early on in this and figuring it out. Senior designer tends to be, I would say, the 5 years, but you could get to senior anywhere between like 5 to 8 years. And you could stay at senior for as long as you want. In many places, that is the level that people want to stay at. It's oftentimes where there's a decision to be made about, do you want to become an expert in your space, or do you want to become a leader or a manager? It's where you start to do less, or not start, but you really do less tactical work. And now you're starting to have more strategic work, more visionary work. Those are larger portions of the type of work you do. You're also doing more influential work on a regular, like you're having more influential meetings on a regular basis. And I'll show you what that looks like. So this is my calendar from December. There's some things about this that are a little different. As our team has grown, more process has been implemented. So you're going to see a few more design share outs or design reviews. I'm also having to defend my time a little bit more. So you're going to see, like, I've got my lunch blocked off so that nobody can schedule lunch with me. I'm also deliberately having a no meeting Wednesday, that even though it's a no meeting Wednesday, it still has meetings on it, but I'm much more selective about the meetings that I say yes to. The calendar's a lot more full when you look at the 9 to 5, right? So I have to be more diligent about carving out focus time for me to actually get to execute design work. So let me show you, this is what this looks like with all my icons. It's looking busier, right? Like it just looks really, really busy, but you're gonna see there's a lot less, there's only like 4 tactical projects that are on my calendar. You're seeing a lot more of the strategic work. Now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 visionary, like envisioning meetings. You're seeing a lot more people meetings where I am meeting to have influence. So I lead our design, our weekly design share out meeting. I'm working on developing relationships, for diversity and inclusion and reaching out to new universities. This is where like I'm mentoring others. Over here, we have a bunch of junior designers that started in the pandemic. So I set up a dedicated office hours for them to meet with me and a few other senior designers on our team to get help with their projects and moving them forward and learning about what it's like to design an enterprise at Microsoft. So now I'm starting to have more impact on people and not just the product. And yeah, I think it's probably all about that. So what there's the lesson that I had to learn, that I've had to learn to get to senior. And it's really about practicing generosity. And what I mean by that is, I'm a big Schitt's Creek fan. So like I love the show. So Moira talking about when one of us shines, how we all shine. And that really around being a senior has been about that promoting others' success really then becomes my success, right? So helping others succeed ends up having broader impact on the product, on the design studio, and on the industry. So this is where I really start thinking about, what's the kind of design studio that we want to work in and how inclusive can we be? And now I start thinking about the types of design, like the portfolios that I see design students have when they're coming out of school. And I start thinking about how hard it is to evaluate whether or not they're going to succeed in our domain space, because it's really complicated and ambiguous. And is there something I can do where I help develop curriculum to evangelize what enterprise design is and what is unique about the challenges that we face around scale and organizational relationships that impact our product, and how do I teach that to students, right? So you start thinking not only about like the actual product work that you do, but how that also ripples out to the world around you and how you can kind of make it better. So I think, this is still something that I think a lot about and that I'm still working on, but I think it's I'm saying a lot of ums, and I was told I was to not do that. But this is definitely, I think, one of the areas where you have a lot more, you can see how your scope and the ripple effect of the decisions that you make and the things that you think about and where you put your energy starts to have a much broader impact. So I think that's the last thing that I have in my deck. And I think I'm right about at where I wanted to be timing wise. So with that, I'm gonna ask for questions. And thank you for inviting me to come and speak today. I was super excited to come and meet all of you. So I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna take questions now.
Everyone, you can come off mute to ask, or if you'd like, you can just type them into the chat.
And hopefully you found that interesting, helpful.
I'm going to be selfish while I wait for others to ask questions, Gail, and I'm going to.
Yeah.
Regarding your calendar, where you showed the view of having a lot of free time earlier in your career, if you were to have booked the time you were actually working actively on projects that came out of those meetings, do you think you still would have had a lot of free time showing on your calendar?
Oh, not as much. I mean, I think, early on, this was a recent topic at one of our design team meetings, was my manager wanted to use me as an example of how I used to over design everything when I first started. I think I used to think very visually, and so I used to have to design everything out before I felt confident in making a decision. So even for like the smallest thing, I could have like 30 screens where I would even show every interaction of a drop down, and and I wasn't just capturing, well, what are the essential screens that I need to capture to convey the idea? And I think so over time, I don't do that much design work. People are smart enough to can figure some of that stuff out. It's more about the idea that I'm conveying. But that used to be part of my process for also learning how everything worked and the portal that I was designing in, right? There's a whole design language that you're learning. And so I think that was just part of my learning process. So it used to take me longer, right, to do the design work. And then I used to over design everything. So yeah.
It sounds like you became more efficient at how to use your time.
Yeah, I think, again, that's born out of necessity. When you start having less time, you need to be smarter about how you use it. So, and then I think another part of that, which isn't shown there, is also the amount of research you have to do, right? So just learning definitions and what people mean when they say authentication and authorization, and what's the difference between those two things, and learning the product space, and learning about the competition. Like all of those things take time of like research. So
let me see what other questions we have here.
So let's see. Do you mean free time or time to execute your individual time not booked? I mean time that is not booked in group meetings. So yeah, because in that is also the time it takes to actually execute the design work. So yeah.
Yeah, that can be an interesting challenge, especially at a place like Microsoft that's very meeting centric.
It is.
Don't put a little time on your calendar to do your work.
Yeah.
People will book over all of your time for meetings.
It's gotten worse in the pandemic too, because you can no longer have those organic conversations in the hallway, right? So it seems like there was a while there where the pendulum swung, and everybody would just grab 30 minutes on your calendar. So I've learned a lot of lessons this last year about, having to defend time, and also what it means to be a designer. I broke my wrist in September and had a few months where I couldn't actually do design work. And so then you're thinking about, becoming a thought leader. Well, what does that mean? That was a new experience where you're kind of paid for your brain and not for the actual design work that you deliver. So yeah.
So we have a good question here. What is the ratio of principal, senior, and junior designers for each team?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I would say we have a fairly good mix of junior designers and mid-level designers. We have a lot of senior designers. We have a lot of people that get to senior and kind of stay there at Microsoft. So we have very few that get to principal. And I think that's an interesting it's something that I struggle with, is understanding the role of a principal as an individual contributor versus a manager. It seems much easier to get to a principal level as a manager at Microsoft than as an individual contributor. But we do have some, and I know that that is something that is starting to change. Principal is really around having a lot of influence across Microsoft, right? And it's much harder to do that at an engineering-driven company as a designer and impacting the kind of the type of product that that it takes to kind of have that scope to get to principal. So that hopefully that answers the question.
We have a question on, are you required to have the skills and vision for visual design as well?
Are you required to have, I mean, the thing that's interesting, you know, you can have your own, like visual design is definitely a discipline of specialization and expertise at Microsoft. We have people on our team that are great visual designers. That is not me. Like, that's not my area of expertise. But there are people that do amazing visual design, and they're the ones that do the wicked backgrounds at our design conferences, and like, you know, they're the ones that are envisioning some of our new design systems and design languages. So there's definitely, you know, there's opportunity to gain expertise around like visual design and think about future, right? What does the future look like for Microsoft around visual design?
We have lots of questions coming in. This is great. So let's see, this might be too broad of a question, but what questions, what suggestion would you give to students going to enter this field, besides always asking more questions?
Yeah. What advice would I give? You know, I think that this is something I observed when I was at school, and I even experienced myself, that I think a lot of students think that they want to land their dream job as their first job, and or that they want to get a full-time role, like what we call an FTE role, as their first gig. And so they limit the opportunities that they have access to by saying, I'm not going to do a contract job, or I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I'm only going to work at Google, or whatever it is that is that company for you. And I think having a more open mindset about the opportunities and curiosity about the different companies is a really great approach to it, because I started as a contractor. I found a team that I loved, but I've known a lot of people that bounced from company to company and team to team as a contractor. They really built out their portfolio in a way and gained access to companies and the cultures of those different teams and those different companies until they found the right fit for them. And they identified holes in their portfolio, and they went out and they sought jobs that would help round out their portfolio and really build it. So if someone didn't have mobile experience, they could say, my next contract job, I want to do mobile. And now they could add that to their portfolio, and they really showed their breadth as a designer of what they could do. So, I mean, I think that that is one thing I would say, is to just have an open mind about the opportunities. And the other one is to start networking early. You know, from the moment I got into HCDE, I was going to SIGCHI and UXPA and all the meetups. And I know we're in a pandemic, but that doesn't mean that you still can't find creative ways to network with people online. And, you know, so oftentimes the way you get jobs is who you know, and it's how you hear about opportunities. And I think the earlier you can start fostering those relationships and connections, the more that will help you in the long run. So
That's great. How does the Microsoft Mentorship Program for the UX designer work? Is there a time frame to apply to the program?
So it's for HCDE only right now. And how it works is you usually apply in September. You get matched with a mentor in October, and then it lasts for the entire academic year. You meet one-on-one with a designer or researcher or whatever discipline that you want. We generally have more students apply than we have designers for, so it's usually a supply and demand issue. As many designers as we can get to participate is usually the cap of how many students we can help. So
Let's see, what else do we have here?
Actually, next question, it might be mine. So can I
yeah,
Please.
by myself? Hi, Gail. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this information with us. I'm actually a master's student from HCDE, and I'm a current mentor from the mentorship program. I find it super helpful. So thank you so much for setting that up. My question is, what different kinds of skill sets are required for designers at the Azure cloud team comparing to maybe other orgs you mentioned at Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes the same skills are required. One thing is that our organization, so when I started in cloud and AI, there were, I'm gonna guess, there were 50 people on our design team. We fit in one floor of one building and it was pretty small. We now have over 600 people in that design organization, right? So over the last 5 years, we have exponentially grown. And a lot of that is because cloud has just gotten bigger, right? And so I think, you know, on a more mature design team, say over in Office, I'm making some sweeping like generalizations right now. So please keep that in mind. Your scope might be much smaller, right? You might be on a team that already is been around for like 10, 15 years, working on a product that's very mature. And so your scope might be working on like one piece of the word, the ribbon in Word, right? Whereas I think about the scope of the projects that I work on, to me is what makes it so exciting is the diversity of projects, right? I get them in all various states of the design process. I personally work on app deployment and security. So how organizations deploy an app and protect an app. And so, you know, I think like I have like 3 or 4 personas that I get to work on. And, you know, so I think the diversity maybe is one thing that that I get to work on. I also think the pace can be fast at times. So the shipping pace can be fast. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's great, Gail. Any questions, additional questions, others?
Well, by all means, everybody feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. I'm happy if you're shy and you don't want to ask them here, you can always message me through LinkedIn and I'll do my best to answer anybody's questions.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
From all of us.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank
Wonderful.
you so much for inviting me. So
Yeah,
it's
and
fun
just
to
fantastic to have you speak to those different levels of your career and some of the best practices that you've run across. This was really a very thoughtful presentation, so greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thanks to all of the folks from HCDE who joined us as well. It was a pleasure, and perhaps we will invite you for some of our other presentations. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Gail.
Bye. Great to see you, Linda.
Nice to see you.